Are you getting a little long in the tooth and you're thinking maybe it's time to retire? When you have a small business, that's a pretty big decision. Hi, this is Randy Kirk at Small Business Daily, and today we're going to be talking about the whole process of how you sell a business, or how you maybe retire and you don't sell the business, or something in between. So there's a lot of options about selling your business. We're going to talk about some of those options, and then we're going to talk about the process. And if that's a subject matter that you think is valuable, would you push the like button, and maybe you could subscribe? And if you would like to be notified about future episodes of Small Business Daily, just push the notify business, and I'll appreciate that because it helps the algorithm. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, so you're maybe even by age 50, it's time to start thinking about what you're going to do. What is your exit strategy? What is your plan? Because sometimes you want to be able to plan this well in advance, because some of the ideas I'm going to present today take a few years to get right. Okay. And but maybe you're older, maybe you're 60, maybe you're 65 or 70, maybe you're thinking, okay, I'm up against it. I really think it's time to buy that boat and get out there and do some fishing instead of continuing a small business. Let's talk about some of the options. Probably the most popular option for most people in small business is to hand it off to an adult child. It's a very, very common method. I've had many of my clients over the years who have had a father-son or a father-daughter or daughter-son situation where they wanted to pass the business off to the next generation. This is a complicated process in many ways, most of them emotional. So it's a good idea to go in with pretty clear understanding of what it might look like as this takes place. So the first thing I think I'd recommend is that if you're planning to do this, that the adult child would now be working for you. Maybe they've gone off and learned some skills that they would have otherwise learned in another world, in another occupation, in another opportunity. Maybe they've been in business for themselves, but now you've discussed it and they're saying, no, I'd like to take over your business when you're ready to retire. So they probably need to come back and get heavily involved in the day-to-day operations of the business and start making a transition, because that's how the best way for this to take place is for it to be a very long transition. And the longer it is, the better for the person who's retiring. The longer it is, the worse it is for the person taking over. So there also has to be some balance in that whole decision-making process. But beginning the process is what it's all about. We'll go back to something you hear me talking about a lot, which is expectations. So as the one who's leaving the business, retiring, what are your expectations in retirement? What are your expectations of your adult child or children in terms of what their responsibilities should be now, how long it might take for the transition to take place? It's a good idea maybe to get these down on paper so that everybody's clear about the retiring person's expectations and hopes and dreams and plans. Then you got the other side of the coin. The adult children need to let their expectations be known. If they're going to give up a career someplace else and come work in the family business, what are their expectations in terms of pay, in terms of benefits, in terms of ownership, and how that ownership transition is going to take place? Making sure that everybody is on the same page on that. If there are adult children that are not going to be involved in the business or in the ownership of the business, making sure their expectations are understood well too, so that there's no family infighting, because we know that when it comes to money, fighting can start even if there's never been a fight ever in the family. As soon as there's money involved, the fighting starts and begins. So get all of those expectations on the table. Make sure that there may be I would highly recommend some kind of document that explains what the process will look like. The formality of it will help everybody to stick to the plan, because what typically happens, or happens a lot at least, is that the retiring person is like, maybe I was a little too rash. Maybe I would like to stay another couple of years. The retiring person may be holding on to control and the upcoming generation is wanting control, desiring control. And now there's a clash. Again, maybe there's always been a great relationship between parent and child or parent and children, but now because of the transition in power, there become these difficult moments. Believe me, it's very likely that those things are going to happen in almost every situation. So if there's a formal writing of what the plan is, then it's harder for the retiring person to say, oh, I want to stay a couple of years. The younger folks can say, if they choose to, no, we all agreed this is the way it's going to take place. We need to stick to the plan. Is there some way that we can make it easier for you? So you're working towards something that everybody's going to feel good about, understanding that there's real potential for conflict on many, many levels. So getting expectations clearly understood and getting the plan on paper are going to be the ways that you're going to best be able to make a smooth transition into the new ownership. You also have to take into consideration what the needs are of the retiring business owner and his family or her family in order to make sure that the finances are going to be there. Because guess what, kids? If the finances aren't enough, you're probably going to have to provide them anyway. So it's always better to have the business providing those long-term financial needs rather than have it something where you feel an obligation to take out of your family's pocket going forward. So those are a few ideas with regard to the family business transitioning into the next generation. Another possibility is your staff. So a lot of times you'll have a staff member or staff members that would like to take over the business. Once again, some of the same things we just talked about are true, but one of the things that's a little more interesting is getting to the valuation of the business. How are you going to value it at the time that the transition starts? Are you going to have a different valuation at the end where you're going to make a final valuation as the last stock or the last ownership is transferred? How are you going to make these decisions with regard to the value of the company? Now, those are issues that you will probably want to discuss with your the earlier method, the family transition. But in that case, everybody should be on the same page that what we need to do is take care of the parents and still make it possible for the children to succeed. So everybody is kind of really on the same page in regard to making sure those two things happen. When it's a little further removed, and even if you're talking about a long-term employee that may feel like family, it's still a little more arm's length. And that person may not be quite as interested in your retiring well as they are in their succeeding in the small business that you've created and not losing their sweat equity and any other equity they may have put into the business. So again, making this determination about value, when we start the process, how are we valuing the company today? Will there be a future reevaluation of the company when the last monies are passed along? So that's one of the things you need to get to. How do you make that valuation? We'll talk about valuation in a minute. Okay, so what else do you want to get done? Well, just like before, expectations, just exactly the same way. We don't need to run over that again. We need to know everybody's expectations. We want to know how long is this transition going to take place? And will there be any sweat equity in that transition? So if your employee is currently making $60,000 a year, are they only going to make $40,000 a year during the transition and $20,000 is going to go into sweat equity? Is there going to be anything else like that that's going to be not 100% cash, but may have to do with their labor or a difference in their income during that period that's going to affect the final total at the end? Will there be some kind of financing at the end? So potentially in larger companies, we may be talking about hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, and the employee or employees may not be able to come up with all of that money during the transition period and even at the end. How will that be financed? Will the retiring owner be providing the financing? Will it be bank financing? Will there be small business administration financing? How is that transition financing going to take place? If there's going to be retiring owner financing that's involved, now you need some additional paperwork that is going to protect the retiring owner from the possibility of the business failing. So how are they going to be protected? Are they going to be protected with assets that are owned by the individuals that are taking over? Are they going to be protected by the ability to retake over the business within the first 2 or 3 years because it's not being run well? What are going to be the criteria that are going to determine what happens if the payments stop? Okay, if the payments against a retired person's taking back money, taking back a note on some of the equity, how is all that going to work? So you want to have that's got to be clear. It's got to be drawn up by a lawyer. It's got to be very, very legally produced. So that's a possibility. Partnerships. If you have a partner, sometimes the other partner will want to continue to run the business as you go off fishing. So here you have another situation. Again, you're going to need the valuations. You're going to need the expectations. All of those things are pretty much the same. But now you're going to be trying to decide, again, how does the partner buy you out? Is it a lump sum? Is it over years? If the retiring partner is kind of young, does there need to be some kind of protection in this case, or in the case of the employees? Does there need to be some kind of protection against that younger owner deciding 5 years from now that, oh, you know what, I think I want to go back into business, and then all of a sudden they're attempting to compete with their old business? So you need some non-compete kinds of language to protect against that. So that's a slight difference with the partner. And then valuing the company. Again, there's some valuation methods. I think at this point, as I'm looking at the clock, we're probably going to get into valuation methods tomorrow. So be sure to come back in and take a look at tomorrow's show. But the valuation of the company, there's methods for valuing it. And your partner and you may have already decided years ago how you would value the company if one was to buy the other one out. Maybe you have a buy-sell agreement. Maybe that buy-sell agreement is covered by some kind of insurance policy, and that can help to determine what the amount of money is that would be appropriate for the one partner to buy out the other partner. But if not, then there's this whole matter of coming up with an evaluation. And again, we'll talk about that tomorrow. The other thing we want to talk about tomorrow is the very obvious method of selling out, which is to find a buyer in the public, just somebody you don't know. So somebody that the methods for doing that and the methods for establishing valuations. And I just realized that we wouldn't have time to get that done today and also talk about how to value. So we'll jump on that subject tomorrow. So this is Randy Kirk with Small Business Daily. We'll see you then.